Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 334 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. It's cold, damp and February. A beekeeper could easily get a little down at the thought of there being no end to this winter. But not me. I'm already thinking about those warmer spring days, and my thoughts are turning towards replacing winter losses and basic queen rearing. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Before we get into today's beekeeping conversation, and in the absence of anyone else supporting my podcast with an advert or two, here's my little self-promotion again. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey, and you never know, there may be something there that will help you improve your beekeeping. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. It's still February, and I don't know about you folks, but I'm getting keen to start the new season. It's an obvious thing to say, but we're not out of the grip of our winter as yet. But as each day passes, we move ever closer to the new season, and I want to touch on a topic that some beginner beekeepers find something of a dark art, and that's basic queen rearing. First up though, a little weather update. It's cold and damp. Not a great combination for our colonies, and those smaller colonies will be coming under intense pressure to survive. Honestly, I think we're going to lose a few more, but that leads into today's topic of replacement colonies and queen rearing quite nicely. Obviously, if you only have one colony and that perishes, you have no option but to start over. And for those of you thinking that maybe quitting is an option, I'll be having a word. On that topic, if you have suffered the loss of your only colony, or perhaps only 2 colonies, and you are considering your options, drop me a message and I'll make time to have a chat with you about it. Quitting because your bees have died out is never the right move. There's lots of reasons people have to stop beekeeping, of course, but losing a colony shouldn't be one of them. So let's talk about a fictitious apiary that I have with 10 hives in it, and unfortunately, the way things have turned out, I've lost 7 out of the 10. It's happened, believe me. I know this because in the past it has genuinely happened to me. First up, take stock of what's happened, learn from it and plan a way forward. I might actually set up an apiary with just 3 colonies in it and build it up through the season into a full block of 10 colonies just to demonstrate how to do this. I best make a note of that, otherwise I'm going to forget. Steph, please take a note. So once you've cursed and cried about losing so many colonies over winter, remove all of the dead colonies and clean them up. Get all of the unusable frames out, check everything for disease, clean the boxes and prepare new frames with foundation ready to get started again. So we're left with 3 colonies and we want to build back up to our full complement of, let's say, 10, but also produce some honey too maybe. How can we do that without spending a small fortune in buying nukes and queens? I would look at the remaining 3 colonies and designate one of them as a honey production colony. The other 2, we're going to use for building back up and maybe also get a little honey from them as well. As an aside, something I say quite a lot of when I'm giving talks is don't try to force your bees to do too much. Here we want a sensible approach that gets us to 10 strong colonies by the time late autumn arrives. We want them to get through the winter next year, of course. Here we arrive at today's topic of queen rearing options, and this week I'm going to start with a simple method for beginners and for those with a couple of years experience, or maybe for those beekeepers who are a little unsure of how to proceed. I'm currently working on a new presentation suggesting that we should all look forward to the swarming phase of the season, that early season manic panic when every colony seems intent on getting away from us. Here we have an ideal opportunity for natural increase without too much effort or pain. You will need some spare equipment, ideally some nuke boxes, but if you don't have several spare nuke boxes, don't worry, you can use those empty hives that you've recently cleaned out and prepared for the new season. We're going to use the swarming phase of the season to develop several nucleus colonies by splitting 2 of our surviving colonies into smaller nucleus groups, each with a queen cell produced in spring. I'm not suggesting an artificial swarm or any version of that because we need more than one additional queen. I sometimes favour the Demaree style vertical split option, but again this only gives us 1 extra queen. We need more, and we need them nice and early. Because we've lost so many colonies in our fictitious apiary, I'm really not worried about any of the traits our remaining colonies have, as what I'm looking for is a bulk increase. If we had the luxury of several other colonies to choose from, it would be advantageous to choose calmness, lack of swarming, honey production, varroa resistance, or any one of several other traits that we might want to select for. But here, we just need to get our colony numbers back up and running. We can adjust for traits at a later stage, maybe next season, once we've had a chance to assess what we've produced. So, let's pretend we're looking at a late April swarming event in our apiary. To keep things simple, 2 of our remaining 3 colonies are throwing up swarm cells and looking to reproduce. How do we use this to our advantage? What we're looking for are queen cells on different frames in each colony. In an ideal world, we want our colonies to be almost reluctant swarmers, producing just 4 or 5 queen cells and, with luck, 1 per frame. Obviously, that rarely happens, but if the colony produces more swarm cells, then it really does work in our favour, as the chances of having swarm cells on different frames increases, and also the quality of those swarm cells can be assessed and the very best cells can be chosen. Let's use just 1 colony as an example, and I'll explain how I manipulate the frames to give me the best chances of success. Let's assume we have 12 queen cells split across 4 frames. That gives us 4 very easy queen rearing opportunities. But first, a little more detail. We have to be very observant here and ready to carry out our manipulations when they need to be carried out. We don't want to leave the colony for too long, otherwise we could quite easily lose a swarm, and that sets us back a little. It's not a total disaster, but we lose a lot of useful workers in that swarm that disappears over the hedge. If the queen cells are sealed, I would find the queen and pop her into one of the nuke boxes. This removes the opportunity of the colony to immediately swarm. Set her up with a frame of emerging brood and a frame of food, and if you recovered usable frames from your dead colonies, pop in a couple of frames of drawn comb with open cells for her to lay in. Fill the remaining space, if you have any, with foundation. This leaves us with 8 frames in our original hive, which is a 10-frame Langstroth hive. Find a frame with queen cells on it, remove all but the best-looking swarm cell, and replace it in the original hive brood box. Next, find another frame with queen cells, remove all but the best swarm cell, and pop this frame into a nuke box. Do the same with all remaining frames in the original brood box. We started with 4 frames that had queen cells, so now we should have the original hive with a queen cell, a nuke box with the old queen in it, and 2 additional nuke boxes with a queen cell in each. Each of these nuke boxes will have an amount of flying bees in them, and they're going to return to the original hive, unless you can take the nukes to another apiary. If you don't have the luxury of another apiary, shake lots of bees into each of those nukes before adding additional frames from the original hive. So the split might be, in each nuke box, 2 frames from the original hive, plus 3 or more additional frames from your dead colonies. Remember, these need to be disease-free. Failing that, add frames of foundation if you don't have any drawn comb. The original hive will have all of the remaining frames, so 4 from the original hive and topped up with foundation or drawn comb, whichever you might have. With a little luck, you'll have 3 new nucleus colonies plus the original queen in a nuke box. If you do this with 2 colonies, that's 6 replacement colonies building up in May, and you might even get a crop of honey from them. That gets us back up to 9 colonies rapidly, using just 2 of the 3 surviving winter colonies. From there, it's a very, very simple job to make up one more split, which could easily be an artificial swarm or another swarm cell split should your honey production colony think about swarming. In that instance, I would remove the original queen into the nuke box, along with emerging brood, knock down all queen cells except for 1 in that original hive, and let them get on with it. Now obviously, this is my perfect scenario in this fictitious apiary, but actually it's not too dissimilar to a situation we had last year in one of our fishing lakes apiaries. One of our colonies threw up swarm cells in exactly the manner I've just described, and we split them into nukes, with one of those colonies going on to the borage pollination and producing 2 supers of honey. No matter how hard the winter treats you and your bees, the point I'm trying to convey in this example is we always have a route back into beekeeping. It doesn't always work out as perfectly as this, of course. Sometimes virgin queens fail to mate or become drone layers. Sometimes the weather wreaks havoc with our timing plans and we find ourselves being delayed. I've even had colonies flatly refuse to swarm at exactly the point that I'm desperate for them to start throwing up queen cells. But that's just beekeeping, folks. I've been asked what techniques I use for queen rearing and to help with some basic queen rearing suggestions. As you can imagine, over the years we've tried a range of different methods, some straightforward, some more aimed at bulk queen rearing, other methods using minimal equipment. Over the next few weeks I'll try to cover off as many different methods that I've tried out and give you my thoughts on what's worked best for us. Hopefully it will be in time for when you need to use some method of queen rearing. Of course, this year we're kind of committed to the John Harding queen rearing setup. I'm determined to give it my best shot and see how this method performs. It's a good way to use a couple of additional nukes if you have them, and at the end of the queen rearing season you can hive them and use them as supplemental colonies for any winter losses that you may suffer the following year. Anyway, more of that in the coming weeks. If you're off to the beekeeping show this month, I hope you have a great time. I'm actually staying local and chatting with the West Norfolk and Kings Lynn Beekeepers Association at their AGM on that day. I'm still not really up to driving too far, so I figured I'd spend that weekend locally instead. I am, however, attending the BBKA Spring Convention again this year, having been invited back to give another talk and host a seminar. Seems I may have done okay last time, so they've invited me back. Let me know if you're going to the Spring Convention and we can perhaps arrange to meet up at the trade show. Also, finally, I'm working with Thorn Beehives this year to deliver several beginner sessions for them at their head office and apiary in Rugby. There are limited spaces, so if you know anyone who may be looking for a beginner's session or simply wants to have a refresher of the basics, then point them in the direction of the Thorn Beehives website to book a slot. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website www.norfolk-honey.co.uk and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.